Hello everybody, I'm HappyFace, and welcome to my Code Vein boss ranking from worst to best. Now before I get into the criteria, I just want to state that this is purely my opinion. There's probably going to be a boss that I really like the community hates, and vice versa. So now onto the criteria. First is Arena. This is pretty simple, just where you fight the boss. Second is balance. This is how fair the fight is, so if the fight is too hard to the point of being unfair, it will not do well here, and if the boss is too easy that it feels like a basic enemy, it also will not do well here. Now third is design, and this one's kind of hard to explain, but it's basically just like how good the fight is as a fight. So for example, in Dark Souls 3, the Abyss Watchers is a boss that I don't like very much, but it does play very well, and I think that the attacks are interesting and that the fight is pretty cool. I just personally don't like it very much. So balance is kind of my way of eliminating too much bias towards a boss. And finally is entertainment, because why do we play video games? For fun. So of course, that's going to be the biggest factor in determining a boss quality. And with that wrapped up, on to the ranking. Of course, the worst boss is Attendant of the Relics. The guys in the hallway put up more of a fight than this boss, and I think you'd have a better chance of dying to pretty much any basic enemy than you would this boss. I barely even have enough footage to show for this fight because it lasted about 7 seconds, and it's just, I don't know, there's no doubt in my mind that this is the worst boss in the game. If it weren't for Attendant of the Relics being barely considered a boss, I would absolutely think this is the worst boss in the game, because I absolutely hate this thing. It's so annoying how whenever you get close, she just teleports to the other side of the arena. It's like I go through this onslaught of dodging these stupid magic attacks, which are very annoying, and then I get to the other side of the room only for her to teleport to the other side on a big explosion. I was getting in like 1 or 2 hits per time, and it's super annoying, especially when she puts the shield up, so it's like my hits don't even do damage, and I have to use like a drain attack. I just don't understand the appeal of this fight, and maybe there's something I'm missing in it, but I just find it to be really stupid. Especially considering with the stupid first phase, it seems like this is going to be the easiest fight in the game, only to have this second phase, which is just super annoying. So, for all these reasons, I think that Successor of the Ribcage is an absolutely horrible boss. Every game has its Ornstein and Smoke copy, and this is by far the worst one I have ever seen. Now, I hate this boss for many reasons, but the main one is because what made Ornstein and Smoke good was that you can split their aggro pretty easily and only have to fight one at a time. In this fight, even if you're fighting the Blade Bearer, which is kind of the point because the Blade Bearer is super aggressive, the Cannoneer is consistently shooting at you, so it's not like you have any time where you have moments of reprieve. Every single time I hit the Blade Bearer, I would usually get hit by the Cannoneer directly afterwards, or I'd just have to Ultra Instinct dodge out of the way, and it was super annoying. The first time that I killed the Blade Bearer, it was the attempt that I won, after 45 minutes of trying. That's almost twice as long as any of the other bosses in this game, and some of the other bosses in this game had long runbacks. This one is just right in front of the missile. I know what you're thinking. Well, if the Blade Bearer is a super aggressive melee, then get the Blade Bearer to the other side of the arena and then go for the Cannoneer, which would be a great thing if the Blade Bearer also didn't have a ranged attack where she shoots this laser beam at you. And an even worse problem is that the Blade Bearer also can use the shield thing that Successor of the Ribcage had, negating one of your attacks. So then you get the attack off, and then you'll get blasted in the face by Cannoneer and not even have done damage. So this fight was just a super long endurance test where I just had to use as much damage as I possibly could on the Blade Bearer by using Ichor and all my other stuff in order to make sure that I could get her out of the way as soon as possible and then take the Cannoneer out. The Cannoneer wasn't very hard when he was on his own. I got hit a few times, but it really was not that bad. And this fight just lasted way too long and definitely overstayed its welcome, and I did not enjoy it. This is definitely a fight that I will dread when I come back to this game. Successor of the Third is a very fast and hard-hitting boss, which makes sense for this point in the game, but I really had a hard time dodging her attacks considering how fast they usually came out. Now, there was this one attack where she would bury both of her hands in the sand and then they would pop out and damage you 3 times. I really hated this attack because I just could not dodge it, and it felt like a very much of a get-off-you attack, which I think is fine for some bosses, but this boss already has like 3 of those in the second phase that are a lot cooler and make more sense for the fight, so this was just an absolutely super annoying attack that made me really hate this boss. The other bad part was that this boss actually had kind of a run back. It was not super hard, but it was pretty long and very, very boring. This boss can also inflict the leak debuff, which is super annoying because it slowly starts draining your Ichor, which isn't nearly as bad as some of the debuffs we'll see later on in some of these bosses, but for this fight it was super annoying considering I wanted to take it like a DPS race because all I wanted to do was get this fight over with before she could get off the annoying attacks. But when I can't use my Ichor to use my strong attacks, it took way longer than it should have to kill this boss. I actually think the new attacks in the second phase made the fight better, even though most of them were like get off you attacks. I still found it to be very good, which just shows how bad that one attack was considering it had the same purpose as these, but it executed it far worse than this attack did. At number 13, we have the first boss in the game, which is actually pretty good considering this is a pretty basic fight. Now, this fight sparked my favorite joke in the entirety of this game, which was because this guy shows up as a basic enemy a lot during the course of this game, every single time I saw that basic enemy, I would always say, yo, is that Oliver Collins? Which it wasn't even that funny, but for some reason in my brain it was the funniest thing ever, considering the fact that they reskinned this enemy so much throughout the game. As a boss fight, he's actually pretty good. He hits incredibly hard and teaches you how to dodge, because his attacks are very easy to dodge, but they do a lot of damage if you get hit by them. The other crazy part was this boss actually had a semi-difficult run back. You had to go through a decent amount of enemies and a bit of the level in order to get back here, which is kind of crazy considering it's the first boss. You think they go easy on you. Now, on the second phase, he does a lot more damage, but he also swings even slower, so it's definitely a lot easier to work around him and get in your hits from behind, which, of course, is the best strategy for every first boss in every video game. Now, the double hit combos in the second phase did catch me off guard a lot, and that's the reason I died once or twice in this fight. That, and I also really had not gotten good at the game yet, since I didn't really know what I was doing. So honestly, all of this made Oliver Collins be a decent boss in my eyes. Next up is Virgin-Born, and I have absolutely no idea how I beat this boss. At first I thought, oh, this is just going to be one of those easy final bosses that isn't really going to be very much of a challenge, and it's kind of just there for filler because they wanted to have a cool-looking final boss. Well, I was severely mistaken, because this is a very challenging boss for me, but I then beat it after not even getting it to halfway before, so I have no idea if I just got really lucky or what, but this boss was just confusing to me. I felt like I never had enough time to get away from its attacks. I felt like sometimes I was doing 4,000 damage per hit, and other times I was doing 100, and frankly, this boss was just all around confusing to me. I was genuinely confused when I beat this boss. I was like, I did not feel like I earned it, but I also didn't feel like it earned any of the times that it beat me. So this was just an all-around confusion fest for me, and this is one of those fights that I feel like was just completely luck-based. I feel like if I went back, I would not be able to beat it again. It was just a complete fluke that I beat it, but I also feel like I would go back and I would beat it within 5 tries from another fluke, and I wouldn't just learn the attacks. But it did have a second phase where it, like, did a bunch of projectile-y stuff at the start, and it looked like it was going to be really hard to dodge, but I just stood in the corner of the arena, and everything missed me. I don't know if that's the intended way to dodge it, or if I just found some loophole, but this, again, added more confusion to the fight that I was already way too confused about, and so that's why Virgin-Born goes here. Maybe this is a really awesome fight that I just didn't understand, but also it might be the worst fight in the game, but I got lucky and it didn't end up being that for me. So let me know what you guys think about this boss, because genuinely I have no idea what to think about it. This was a boss I was really worried about, because when I walked into the arena, I got hit by her first 5 attacks and immediately died. But then when I came back, I beat her on my second try, and it really wasn't that hard. I think this fight just took me getting beaten to the ground once to figure out that she was going to be a super speed boss with tons of gap closers. Now, even though she had all these super fast attacks and tons of gap closers, I still had ample time to heal, which was really weird considering I think she was just going to jump straight to me and kill me immediately every time I tried to back up. But that wasn't the case. So this actually ended up being one of the easiest fights in the game, even though it was super fast and confusing. I guess that's good that they made her do less damage considering how fast she was, which is always a good thing that balances out fights like this, but I think it made it too easy in this situation, especially when she had other attacks that weren't super speed claw attacks, like some sword swings and other stuff, which I didn't really get to see very much because I only fought her a few times. But still, this was an interesting fight that I kind of wish I had gotten to see more of so I could give it a more fair ranking, but as it stands now, this fight was too easy. Argent Wolf Berserker is another one of those kind of bosses that's thrown into the middle of a random area, and I would compare it to Attendant of the Relics, except for the fact that he actually has health. The run back is atrocious, and is actually sometimes harder than the boss, and caused me to be weakened every single time I enter the arena. And 3, is you fight this boss in an arena the same size as the Capra Demon, but it's missing the staircase. How am I supposed to fight this massive wolf beast in an arena the size of a shoebox? Well, he has one magic attack, which wasn't that bad, considering it was very simple to dodge. His melee attacks were actually really cool and interesting. I probably could have blocked them, which was something that I didn't really get used to at this point, and I don't think I really ever did, since I almost never used that mechanic. The problem was healing. I have this little shoebox-size arena, so anytime I want to heal, I have to get to the opposite end of it, and this is a pretty fast boss, so he can just charge me to the other side of the arena, and it's kind of a problem. So I had to just get behind him and hope and pray that he didn't do an attack that had a massive backswing and knocked me out. I feel like they should have made his attacks a little slower, considering how fast they can come out when he does a double swing, especially considering they arc literally around his entire body, so nowhere is safe except away from him, or if you're doing a perfect dodge, which was really hard when you thought that an attack was not going to hit you because you were clear behind him. Anyways, this was a pretty interesting boss and made a lot more difficult by all of these things, but still a boss that I would enjoy fighting again. Next up is Butterfly of Delirium, and just a quick apologies for not having the main game version of this fight because I forgot to record it, so I had to go into the depths to get the footage of the fight, which is still the same fight, just the arena looks a little bit different. Now, this boss is one of those fights I think is absolutely carried by a status effect. If this boss did not have the Venom debuff, it would be so easy, but getting hit by like 2 or more of her attacks in a short time span will just cause you to lose the fight because you'll have Venom debuff. Her attacks are pretty easy to dodge, and they give you plenty of time, which makes sense for being the second boss in the game. But then again, for being the second boss in the game, this is still pretty difficult. So I made sure that I was focusing more on dodging than I was damage for most of this fight, considering getting the Venom debuff more than once just spells my death immediately. Now, the second phase doesn't really add very much, except for it makes the one attack where she charges at you way harder to dodge, because there's a poison trail behind it, which seems really weird, because that seems like the intended way to dodge the attack, but then I get penalized by getting the Venom debuff. So frankly, I have no idea how you're supposed to dodge that in the second phase. But the projectile attacks in the second phase really were not that bad. So overall, this fight ended up being not nearly as difficult, but it still took me a few tries to beat it both times, considering the Venom debuff caught me off guard and does way too much damage for this point in the game. Insatiable Despot was a pretty easy boss, but I still found it to be pretty fun. In the first phase, he can spawn ads by making these big crystals, but I just destroyed them before the ads could even pop out, and they were super easy to deal with. The attacks in the first phase were very easy, and I just found getting under him to be the best strategy. Now, the second phase is where I had problems. When he pulls out this big axe, I got hit by almost every attack. I would always try to roll under him so that I could end up getting under him and then just hit him from behind, but instead he would move forward a lot and then do a 360 spin and hit me with the axe. So I took a lot of damage in that second phase, a lot more than I would have liked, but it was still a pretty easy fight considering his health bar was super small, so as long as I didn't get hit by every single attack, it was pretty easy. The range attacks were incredibly easy to dodge through, as long as I didn't get too close to him before he cast it, then it would be more of a problem, but the biggest issue was the hilt of his axe did a lot of damage. I wouldn't expect the hilt to have a hitbox, but the entire weapon was a hitbox during this fight, which made it a lot more difficult to dodge his attacks. Gilded Hunter is like Code Vein's DPS test. The first phase is pretty easy and kind of resembles some of the basic enemies you fight throughout the game. He has simple halberd attacks and they're very easy to dodge. The problem is the second phase. The second phase he buffs and goes absolutely crazy. He gains projectiles at the end of all of his attacks, he goes super speed mode, and there's no way to get away from him without taking at least tons of damage. The only moment of reprieve is the AoE attack, where you sometimes get a heal in or run to the other side of the arena. So during this, I decided not to attack him almost at all, and just run away. Now once he finishes his buff, he goes back to how he was at the beginning of the fight, where it's super easy to kill him. So as long as you have enough DPS to kill him before he buffs a second time, which if he buffs a second time, basically your fight is just over, because you're not going to have enough resources to survive it again. So just pray that you get good RNG during the buff phase, and then just kill him immediately after he's done, and it'll be a pretty easy fight. It did take me quite a few tries in order to get the luck needed to beat this guy, but still, I got it eventually, and it didn't really feel like I earned the victory. It just felt like kind of one of those fights that you just have to wait till you get lucky, and then you'll get it eventually. I didn't really get good at dodging any of his attacks in the second phase, but that didn't matter since I just waited long enough for it to run out, and just hoped that he gave me the AoEs. Invading the Executioner is the main roadblock of the early game, and this boss is yet again carried by another debuff, this time being the slowness debuff, which causes you to move at half speed for a few seconds. Now, this debuff doesn't sound that bad, but for this boss who is super fast, it is incredibly terrible. Most of the attacks are really hard to dodge when you're not inflicted with this debuff, let alone when you are inflicted with this debuff. Thankfully, you can block most of her attacks in the first phase, so it really doesn't get that bad, but the second phase, if you get hit with the debuff, just kiss goodbye to your run, because it's not going to be there anymore. The first phase attacks are pretty simple, just mostly sword swings and pole stabs into the ground, but the second phase is where it gets serious. I would usually back away into the corner while she does the water splashy attack, because I didn't want to get hit by any of that, especially because it procs the debuff pretty quickly. Now, the charge attack she did right after that was the biggest problem in this phase. I have no idea why her running into you at full speed does more damage than getting clunked in the head by a massive stick. It did so much damage, over half of my health bar, and usually procced the debuff in 1 to 2 hits, so this made the fight a lot harder. The other problem is now when she stabs her pole into the ground, what used to be an easy attack to get a hit in, now has a guaranteed follow-up which does tons of damage and can easily almost kill you. So, all of this dashing and dancing and whatever stuff was super annoying and made me have to constantly keep on my toes. And if I got hit by a single debuff in this second phase, I was dead, because I could barely dodge the attacks quick enough as it was, let alone moving at half speeds. So this was an incredibly difficult fight that took me like 15 plus tries, and was incredibly hard for the early game. The other problem was the pole swing that had an around the world follow-up. Now this attack, just like Ardent Wolf Berserker, I thought I was going to be fine because I'm standing clear behind her, but then the backswing hits me in the head, and usually if you get hit by both of these attacks, it will instantly proc the slowness debuff, so that would end so many of my runs. The other issue was she had some magic attack, where she would explode the ground below you, but that one wasn't really that bad because it had a huge wind-up, and usually you had plenty of time to dodge even if you didn't notice the wind-up. She also only did it at range, so as long as you stayed in close, this attack would never happen. And eventually I got through all of that baloney, and now looking back on it, it was actually a pretty enjoyable fight, minus the slowness debuff, which I still absolutely hate and ruined this fight a little bit for me, which keeps it out of the top 5. Now we're on to the bosses that I look forward to when I end up playing this game again, with of course starting with Queen's Knight. Now this boss has some awesome sword and shield attacks that are very fun to dodge, and frankly almost like a Dark Souls boss. It's a very good flow of combat that I find very rarely interrupted, and it's just amazing for this first phase. The second phase gets a little crazier, but I don't think it ruins the fight. He starts teleporting all over the place, above you, behind you, all around you. Now the good part about this is sometimes he corners himself into a wall and it's really easy to get tons of hits in, but other than that, usually the teleporting is more of a curse than it is a blessing. Now, him teleporting above you can be very difficult, especially to sight read it and dodge it in time, so I just ended up spamming the roll button every single time I saw him teleport, but he does leave you ample time to roll even if you don't want to use that strategy. This boss may not have been able to get above number 5, but I still praise the Queen's Knight as an absolutely amazing boss in this absolutely amazing video game. Successor of the Breath is a really interesting boss, especially considering the fact that he has 2 completely separate phases that are very different from each other. In the first phase, he has a shield, and he does some classic shield bashes, shield punches, and charge attacks. I really like the horn into the ground attack. It does way too much damage for this point in the game, but I think it's a really interesting follow-up attack, and sometimes the best way to dodge it is actually to tank the initial hit, because it only does like 200 damage, and then that will give you a 100% guarantee to dodge the second attack, which does like way more damage. So, second phase, however, he goes crazy. He just throws away the shield and starts punching you to death like a boxer. It's very interesting, and I think that the charge attacks and the one attack where he starts flying is really interesting. The magic attacks add a nice bit of spice, which I find to be very fun for this fight, but the one problem I have is that when he does the horn into the ground attack, he can turn around, and in the second phase, when it shoots 3, it just hits me every single time, because by the time that I notice that he's turning, I've either already queued an attack, or I start running to the side, and even still, I don't have enough time to not get hit by it. So other than that, I think this is an amazing fight. Kind of weird, but for some reason it just stuck with me, and I really enjoyed it. Queen's Knight Reborn is exactly what it sounds like. It's Queen's Knight after his training arc and after he started taking steroids, because this fight is absolutely insane. I don't know if he's actually faster, but he certainly feels a lot faster in this fight, and the teleporting in the second phase gets way more hectic. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually really interesting, and it makes sense for one of the final bosses in the game to be this ridiculous. Now, the first phase is pretty similar to the first phase of regular Queen's Knight, except the arena is a little bit smaller, and the attacks feel a little bit faster, and I don't know if that's actually true. However, the second phase is when stuff gets crazy. He's teleporting now, is way faster, at least it feels faster, and he also has an attack where he teleports behind you, and then does a shield spin attack. This is very difficult to dodge, because if you spam the roll button, you won't dodge it. The only way to tell that he's doing it is because he does a different charge-up animation before the teleport, but you have to react to that very quickly, and usually I'll have just spammed roll. So that I found that attack to be hitting me a lot. The only bad part about this fight is that he has this like green mist thing that he puts around him in the second phase, and that's super annoying because it kind of just forces you to stay away from him unless you want to get inflicted with debuffs, which of course I don't want to get inflicted with debuffs because that sounds like a bad thing. The crazy teleport spam no longer ends in a plus sign, but instead sends projectiles to the edge of the arena on all sides, which I think is a really cool thing, especially when they blow up and do a ton of damage, but still you have plenty of time to react to it, especially as long as you roll in instead of out. And overall, this was a really good improvement to an already fantastic boss. The bosses before this were good, but this is where the bosses get absolutely fantastic. Now, it's gonna sound like I hate this boss because, well, it took me forever to beat this guy because he was really difficult, but I really don't. I think it's actually so much fun and just one of the greatest bosses in the entire game. The projectiles in the first phase are kind of annoying, especially when he spawns the big balls, because they kind of just break up the flow of combat since I don't want to start fighting him only to get interrupted by one of those. Now, the sword swings are very simple and basic, but they're very fun to dodge. The projectile sword swings are also really cool and really awesome if you can dodge them backwards instead of just rolling to the side to get out of the way of them. Now, the claw attack is also pretty cool and will come back to be very helpful in the second phase. Speaking of the second phase is very interesting, and now everything pretty much inflicts the inhibit debuff, so be careful not to get hit. Now, he starts it with probably the worst attack, where he spawns 4 dots around you and they slowly close in, and once they close in, they do a bunch of damage in an explosion. I hate this attack because I have to roll out of the way of it, meanwhile he's still attacking me. But it's okay, because this is kind of a DPS test. If you can kill him quickly in the second phase before he does any of the crazy attacks, it's actually not that bad. Like I said in the second phase, just stay close, because the claw attack and the basic sword swings are really easy from close range. If you get too far away and he does the blink dash that explodes, it will literally one-shot you. I found no way to reliably dodge it or to reliably not get one-shot by it, even if I had to tank it. So this was an awesome boss fight, and I just found it to be such a fun flow of combat. I did think it was a little annoying that they had another DPS test so quickly after the Gilded Hunter, but still, I can't really say anything negative about this boss because all of it is just so fun. It seems annoying at first, but once you beat it, you'll look back on it and realize it's the best boss in the game. Well, almost. Finally is, of course, Skull King. This is my absolute favorite boss in this game, and one of my favorite bosses of all time, probably like in my top 30. I thought it was so fun, but it was also so difficult. I had to develop a whole strategy because this guy buffs so often. I would use my strongest Icar attack right after he was done buffing to get in a free like 8,000 damage every single time. Without this, I would not have been able to beat this boss because this was absolutely brutal and definitely the peak difficulty of this game. The attacks were so fun to dodge, and I had to learn every single attack, and rather than I could get a hit in or a heal in afterwards. It was so much fun, and I can't stress enough how this was absolutely the best boss in the game. So I think instead of just telling you, I think I should just show you. Enjoy my entire winning attempt of this fight. And then 4th phase is, I haven't even gotten there in a little bit, but we are getting. That's fine. You know, that's not what I want to happen. But that's fine. This is really not going well. Well, I built up some more Icar. So we can 6 Icar rule. Actually do some good dodges. Thanks, PC. Go dodge. Yes! Okay, I guess that is just a second phase attack. Perfect! 6 Icar rule! Okay, I was about to say, where's the guaranteed follow-up, but then it just didn't show up, and then it was delayed. He hasn't staggered yet, which is concerning. Okay. That is an attack you can always get a heal off. Like, that is 100% a reliable way to heal. Oh, baby! Oh, baby, it's happening. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Did I just do it? Yes! After looking back on it from all my favorite bosses and all the other video games that I've played, I've noticed that my favorite bosses tend to be the bosses that last the longest. I'm not saying this is usually a good thing, because there's some bosses that definitely overstay their welcome, but the ones that don't overstay their welcome and last like an hour or more of gameplay are just so awesome, and looking back on them, they're absolutely the best. So this certainly cements Skull King as my favorite boss in Code Vein. Well, there it is, my Code Vein boss ranking, and while I fight Skull King more, because obviously I just want to continue to show footage of this fight because it's so awesome, I'll just let you know that my next video is going to be the Dark Souls 1 Pyromancy Only Challenge. This was definitely my longest and most difficult run ever, so I'm really excited for the video, and it should be out, well, I don't know, it might take like a month, because it's going to be really difficult. The reason it's going to be hard to edit is because I've never really edited a non-linear game like Dark Souls 1, because all my other like really edited videos have been for very linear games, so I just kind of explained what I did going down the line. But Dark Souls 1 is going to be a lot harder for this, because I keep jumping around from place to place to place, so hopefully I still get it out in a reasonable amount of time, and I really hope you enjoyed that video when it does come out. Speaking of enjoying the video, I really hope you enjoyed this video. These really aren't that hard to make compared to my challenge run videos because the editing doesn't take nearly as long. So if you enjoyed it, please let me know, and I will gladly be making more in the future, since this is definitely a kind of video that I can pump out bi-weekly or so. So with that, thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope this video could provide you with some entertainment, and I will see you guys later. Bye bye!